Hello and welcome to Knowledge Management Matters Conversations. In just a moment, we'll be joined by Stephanie Barnes, Director of Doing Things Differently at Art of Innovation. Stephanie's based in Berlin and has kindly agreed to chat with us today about her chapter, Creativity and Innovation, which is part of our book, Knowledge Management Matters, Words of Wisdom from Leading Practitioners. The catalyst for this book was the desire to help leaders who are interested in knowledge management. To achieve this lofty goal, we reached out to practitioners who we admire in the knowledge management world to see if they would share what they have learned. We were absolutely delighted with the people who agreed to join the project, including Stephanie. The result is a collection of works penned by an amazing and diverse group of thought leaders. Each of these trailblazers has generously shared their knowledge with a view to helping you and your organization succeed in the knowledge environment. The tips, tactics, and techniques they suggest are time-tested and proven concepts that we believe will help you achieve your organizational objectives. Knowledge Management Matters is unique in that all of the authors agreed to share their knowledge freely. The book is available as a free PDF and as a free Apple iBook. For more information, please visit our website. All right, well, with that as background, let's move to the main event today, which, of course, is our conversation with Stephanie Barnes. And Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, you're welcome.
Stephanie and I first met at KM World, and I think that was back in 2004, which really makes you think about how time flies. And Stephanie's very well known in KM circles and is the author of a very popular KM book called Designing a Successful KM Strategy, a Guide for the Knowledge Management Professional, which I highly recommend. If you haven't read that, please pick up a copy of that. Stephanie's worked with clients and delivered workshops literally around the world, including in Canada, the United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, China, Germany, and probably many more that I'm forgetting. She's a very accomplished and passionate artist, and I highly recommend that you take a look at her collection. Combining her two passions, KM and art, brought together this very interesting chapter that she wrote for Knowledge Management Matters called Creativity and Innovation. And so, Stephanie, with your permission, I would like to read just a short piece from the book to sort of set the scene, and then maybe we can have a discussion about that.
Sure, sounds good.
So Stephanie wrote, and I'm quoting, "We seem to have spent so much time in the last 100 years or so trying to drive efficiency and effectiveness into our processes. Indeed, those are often two of the main drivers of KM implementations. How do we do things faster, with more quality, with better outcomes, reduce waste, reduce rework? These are not bad things," she wrote, "but in our push to be effective and efficient, many of our organizations have removed the time for reflection, for questioning, for considering alternatives from the process. Innovation and creativity are powerful skills that we need for differentiation purposes in our organizations, and to which we are attracted as humans. Sadly, too often we let self-criticism and anxiety, as well as the drive for efficiency and effectiveness, hold us back from being creative. In the right environment," she wrote, "and with the right tools and techniques, we can progress past these blocks and let creativity and innovation become a regular, useful, and part of our daily lives, careers, and workplaces." Wow, what a powerful idea, one that I certainly support. I often call effectiveness and efficiency the evil twins that we're chasing. But can you share with us what you mean by the right environment?
So the right environment, and this is not just a knowledge management thing, but a management thing, a leadership thing. The right environment includes being open and honest in the communication. It's not non-judgmental. It doesn't blame people when things go wrong, because people are people and things go wrong. You know, you do the best you can with planning, but sometimes something unforeseen comes in and it doesn't go the way that you think it will. So the right environment really allows for those kinds of mistakes and errors and looks at, you know, what the root cause is of that and how to do better next time, and doesn't get caught up in blaming people and punishing people when things go wrong. So there's also an ability to question and challenge assumptions in the right environment, so that people aren't afraid to speak up when they see something going off the rails, or they see a risk that maybe someone else, the rest of the team, hasn't seen because of their experience. So the right environment allows for that kind of communication and challenging and questioning assumptions.
Great. And any particular organizations that you're aware of that you would sort of say are using that right environment concept?
Certainly the companies that I mentioned in the chapter, but I was actually just reading before we did our call or started our session just now about Nintendo and their creativity. And I thought the CEO was quoted, and I actually wrote it down. It's here on my screen, so I'm going to bring it up here a little bit so I can read it. And he says, "People always ask us whether we take risks on purpose. But to us, we don't really take risks. We just keep trying new things." And I love that. They don't see it as risk. We're just trying a new thing. We're just trying it out and see if it works. It didn't work? Okay, next thing. When I went out on my own 15 years ago, I used to say every potential client I talked to that said no, I would say, "Oh, I'm one no closer to a yes." It's same idea with this or trying this. Oh, it didn't work. On to the next thing.
Sure.
It's so, and that's an element then of the right environment, a good environment to work in. So
great. Now, in your book, you suggest that critical thinking underlies all knowledge management. We have this debate in education frequently, but I wonder if you could share with us your views on the link between critical thinking and knowledge management.
Yeah, the critical thinking thing was something I didn't realize until, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. I had never really given it much thought. And I was working with a client, and 10 years into my consulting career, had worked with lots of clients, but was working with this new client. And they were very educated, very smart, very capable people. It wasn't a question of, but because they had come up through a very education-centric environment, they were really had been taught, had learned that there was a right answer, and they just needed to regurgitate that back. And so when I came to do the lessons learned process with them, they would be like, "Well, what's the right answer? Tell us the right answer." Because they wanted to have it perfect the first time, right? And not make mistakes, not need lessons learned, because we're doing it right the first time. And I got a bit frustrated at first working with them, trying to figure out why this wasn't working the way that it had every other time I had worked, a lessons learned process. And I realized that was the education system, and that they had really internalized that I'm going to just regurgitate what the professor, the teacher, the textbook has told me, and that's the way I'm going to do it. But real life isn't a textbook. Mm-hmm. People come in and muddy the waters, and it's much more complicated than anything you would ever capture in a textbook. So they hadn't quite got over that barrier. So then when I realized this critical thinking issue, I could build that into their KM strategy and their communication strategy and their training and development strategy, and work with them on being more comfortable with not having the right answer the first time, and actually learning then and capturing the learning and figuring out how to do it better the next time. So yeah, I think that's probably a long answer to the connection between critical thinking, but I realized that so many of the organizations I'd worked with in the 10 years leading up to that, people were much more open and hadn't had the same, I'm going to say, indoctrination from the education system to regurgitate the right answer. There had been some allowance for, people sharing their own ideas and asking, questions and challenging assumptions and challenging what the textbook said or what the professor said.
Very good. Very, very interesting. Now, in your chapter, you write about the difference between organized and unorganized knowledge. How does that come together in this idea of creativity and innovation?
Innovation and creativity facilitating the flow between those two things. We have lots of organized knowledge in databases and knowledge repositories. We've got our taxonomies and our folder structures and our own, our metadata and all this organization, which is great and useful so that people can find it again. But then we've got all this stuff that's in people's heads and isn't necessarily documented. It isn't in a repository that we need access to. And the creativity and innovation brings those two together and helps, the flow between getting that out of people's heads and into a repository, or taking the stuff that's in the repository and blending it with what's in somebody's head and coming up with a new solution, a new idea, something new, putting the pieces together differently.
Sure. Very, very interesting. Possibly the part of your chapter that I enjoyed the most was your discussion about what we could learn from artists, such as Van Gogh and Leonardo da Vinci. So what is it we can learn from them?
Artists have very distinct practice. They tend to be open-minded and question a lot of things, and they try a lot of things. When I do workshops, that's one of the things I do with the participants. When we do the artistic part of the workshop, the people will say to me, "Oh, well, what happens if I do this with the paint?" Or what happens? And I'm like, "Try it, see what it does." I'm not going to tell you what happens. I know what happens. Well, sometimes I know what happens, sometimes I don't. And I'm like, "Well, try it. See. There's nothing. We're not painting the Mona Lisa here. Try it and see what happens. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't." So artists try things out and they iterate and they ask the questions. And that was one of the things, Xerox was one of the case studies I talked about in the chapter. And they actually brought artists in to work with their R&D department. And the artists ask completely different questions because they have a different background and a different mindset than the scientists do. And it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just they have different skills and abilities and backgrounds, and they look at things differently. The artists wanted to do completely different things than the scientists wanted to do with the same technology. So they learned from each other, and I love that example because this program was supposed to go for 12 months, for a year, and ended up going for 6 years, and basically got killed when management, changed. And that's all too often what happens with some of these things. Somebody new comes in and doesn't get it and throws it out, and they don't recognize the value that they're throwing out. So yeah, this artists just have a different way of looking at the world. Artists too will. And speaking as an artist myself, we have a limited budget. So then there's constraints. I can't go out and buy all the colors of paints and all the materials I would like. I have certain materials that I have to use, and so then it's a question of how can I, use what I've got to create the painting or do what I want with the smaller set of tools and materials. So we work within the box. We also think outside of the box because of those constraints. I think of the movie Apollo 13 was then when they're trying to build the air filter with the materials that are on, that's creativity. That's okay. We've got the astronauts have these materials, these supplies. They've got to build, a filter, and how can they do that? How can we help them do that? So, that's artistic. That's creative.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree. I think we need to have more of that sort of cross-discipline collaboration and really stretching or pushing the envelope on how far you go with that. Very, very interesting. Now, the other piece that I found very intriguing was the work that you're doing with the Age of Artists. Tell us about that organization and how you brought that into the KM world, how it can help KM professionals.
I was so excited when I found the Age of Artists. They're a group here just outside of Berlin, and they finally, this was just 2.5 years ago when I first moved to Berlin, that I found them, and I thought, oh, finally somebody else gets this. I'm not the only one that sees the link here. and what the work that I do or have been doing with bringing in my artistic practice into knowledge management, they have then taken that a step further and said, okay, all of these things are from artists, and they've then developed this model or this framework then that says, okay, these are the artistic practices. How do we apply this to a business problem? What are these activities and how does this relate to typical business problems? So they've developed this model to show the flow and the connection between these artistic practices on one hand and business issues on the other. So I was so excited to find them and to be working now with them on this model. They have talked to over 100 artists and businesses about their model, their framework. So they're actually publishing a book about the framework in German. First, should be published in June or July, I think. And we're working on an English translation, which I'm excited about too, because that'll expand more on the thinking behind the model. But yeah, they do consulting and go out and talk with companies and apply these creativity ideas to, how to do business better.
All of us are so busy. We work in this 24/7, always on environment where we're with our emails, text messages. Do we have time for this creativity and innovation? Or is this just another thing that you're asking us to add on to our already busy lives? Will it really add value to what KM professionals are doing?
And yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
My next answer is really a question on do we have time not to? We have, as you mentioned in the blurb that you read off the top, we have got so tied up with the efficiency and the effectiveness and just go and just go and just go and just go and no time for thinking and reflection. Well, people aren't machines. We're not robots. We need the time to think and reflect, and not just for our jobs, but for our lives, and take that pause. We talk about mindfulness. That's about taking pause and taking space and just allowing ourselves to breathe. Nanaka in his book in, Knowledge Creating Company that was published more than 20 years ago now, his idea was Ba, and that space for knowledge creation. We need the space. You can't, when you're running 100 miles an hour all the time, or 100 kilometers an hour in Germany, you don't have time to think and stop and go, well, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. Maybe we should be doing this differently. Maybe there's a piece of data out here that I'm not paying attention to because I don't have time to go and look at it. So I think that we really can't afford to ignore that and allowing ourselves some more space and our organization some more space. I think the pace that we have pushed ourselves to is really not sustainable, both from a corporate perspective and a personal health, perspective. So,
excellent words of wisdom. Anything else you'd like to share about your chapter?
I don't know. I really was glad that you gave me the chance to write. I have been all of these things I had done, in blog posts and things over the last 5 or 6 years. So I was glad to get the invitation, from you and to put them all together in something cohesive, and especially to bring in the Age of Artists stuff, which is relatively new, and and to bring it into a cohesive whole. So I was, very appreciative of and glad for that opportunity. So it's work that I'm really excited about. So.
Well, thank you so much for doing the interview today, but more importantly for writing the chapter. And we were so happy, Joanna and I were so happy that you decided to join the team. What we were looking for was some diverse ideas. We didn't want to have just the same old that sometimes happens in knowledge management. And so we did reach out to folks who had some different ideas. And we were just so happy when you decided to do your piece on creativity and innovation. And like the other chapters, some interesting ideas that not everybody's going to agree with. And that's fine by us too. The world would be an incredibly boring place if we all did things exactly the same. So I truly believe that you've added great value to the book, and I hope that it's useful for folks that are reading it. Just a reminder to everybody who maybe hasn't got a copy of the book, it is available for free. That's one of the things that we were so happy the authors all agreed to do. It's available as a free PDF download, and we'll put the website up for you to get access to that, or also as an iBook for folks that would prefer that format. But Stephanie, thank you again so much for taking time today. We really appreciate it, and good luck in Berlin, and good luck with your artistic career as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.